This is the EZONE 100. I'm here to break the honest truth about this racket. What's up guys, this is the EZONE 100 and I'm here to break the honest truth about this racket. That's right, today we have the EZONE 100 in the house. Definitely some things to talk about with this racket. First off, nice new paint job here. I'm a big fan of it. I know some people are not. I like how it's the simple, nice blue color. I like the words here as well. It's a 16 by 19 pattern, 100 square inches, 27 inches length. We have this VDM tech that they got in here, which stands for vibration dampening mesh. They've had this in their rackets the last few years, I believe. Some people are fans, some people not a fan. So we're gonna jump into all of that here in a little while. Also, it came in at 322 grams static weight when it was strung and 324 swing weight with a 5-point headlight balance. Big thanks to Graffiti for helping me with those specs. I have their machine and machines back in my apartment, so big thanks to them. Also, thank you to Tennis On. Without them, this video is not possible. So if you guys want to pick up an EZONE 100 or any other rackets, shoes, tennis attire, you can use our code to get a little bit of a discount. So with all of that, how does this racket perform on court? I did say the honest, brutal truth about this racket. First off, it's not really for me. I'm using an Extreme Pro. This is not really my type of racket. It's 100 square inches, quite a thick beam. This racket will work for a lot of players, but I'm gonna kind of expose it here and why it might not work for someone like me. So first here on the Groundstrokes, first thing to note, it's a lot lighter than my Extreme Pro. So I felt like I was swinging and I was almost too early on the ball because of the swing weight, if that makes sense. So I actually found myself hitting the odd shank. And that actually occurred up here quite a bit. So my timing was a little bit off because the racket was around 10 grams static and swing weight below from what I'm used to. I could have added weight, maybe that would have made the racket perform better. However, I'm trying to not add weight on the review rackets because I want to give a true review for everyone. Not everyone is going to add weight. A lot of people won't add weight actually, so that's one thing to note. My first little nitpick thing about this racket is whenever the ball is hit up in this section of the racket, the top half of the hoop, I had some inconsistencies with it. Not a great feeling up there. The racket would occasionally buckle. And I think that's just because I'm swinging fast and this doesn't have a lot of weight behind it. When it hit the sweet spot, it felt pretty good, but just overall on the Groundstrokes, forehand and backhand, when I was making contact up here, I was not getting the greatest response, didn't quite feel the ball coming out of the string bed. Is that the isometric head? I don't know. I've always had a little bit of a hard time with that. You are able to play, spin with this and you get pretty decent power off the Groundstrokes. We'll talk about those later, spin and power. But overall, not my favorite racket here from the baseline just because of the issues I was running into up at the top here in the hoop. So we're gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Up at the net, this racket really surprised me actually with the volleys. Since I had these issues up in the top of the hoop on the Groundstrokes, I thought it would perform horribly up at the net, but for some reason it performed very good. With this racket actually, I had probably some of the best volleys for depth with comparing to any other racket I've ever used. Like this racket at the net was keeping my opponent behind the baseline, no problem with the volleys. Like great access to depth with this frame up at the net with the volley. When it comes to touch and feel up at the net, maybe not amazing, but if I had to solely give it a rating on depth volleys, this would be off the charts. Definitely a 10 out of 10 for the depth type of volley, but overall in the volley, I'll bring it down the score a little bit just because for touch and feel, it's a thick beam, it's 100 square inch. You can't expect to have all the touch and feel in the world, with a frame like this, so we're gonna give it a 9 out of 10 up at the net. Now with serves, similar issue I had here with Groundstrokes is most of the time I feel like I'm hitting the ball on the serve right about here, so more on the upper side of the bed, and that was not great for me because of that issue that we talked about earlier. That's a big one, and it's tough to kind of work with that when you don't have a feeling. So I think if someone is maybe not swinging as hard as me or they added weight, they would not have this issue. But For me, I didn't really love it on the serve at all, so I'm gonna stick it at a 5 out of 10 with the serve. Now, on the other flip side, we get the return. I did like it more on return than serve. When I made contact here in the middle, flew out pretty good with a lot of juice actually. However, once again, making contact up near the hoop, extremely unstable. That's just kind of the theme here for me with this racket. Just kind of buckling when you get a flat serve coming. If you don't make contact in that middle of the bed, you don't get much feeling out of the racket, and it just buckled. It kind of felt like it crumbled. Maybe it would be better if they didn't have this VDM tech, because that's like a dampening technology. I'm not a big fan of over dampening rackets because it takes away a lot of feeling. So with this, on the return, when you get a big flat serve at you, you lose a lot of feeling, but then also since the racket was so light, it just kind of buckled on return. However, I did like it more returning than serve, but not by a lot. So we are gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Now for the power category, this is gonna be great if you wanna just, grip and rip for flat or tight spin type shots. If you want to hit, on the run flat forehands, or you have a flatter swing, this will work pretty good for you. I think the directional control coming out of this racket with power is quite good. Whenever you involve spin, that's where it goes a little weird and wonky, but we'll talk about that later. But power overall, you do get it with this frame. However, when like I talked about, when you over swing or swing with a lot of acceleration, maybe it's gonna sail long. That's some issues that I ran into, but it's gonna give you plenty of power, to my point. So I'm gonna give this 9 out of 10, maybe even too much power for some like me, but I don't wanna give it a poor grade here because I feel like for most people, it's gonna provide them with great power. So that's why we're giving her a 9 out of 10. Okay, now to control. This is where, it goes back downhill a little bit for me. When I'm hitting more with spin, the depth control is good for the most part, but when it comes to directional, when I'm trying to hit with topspin, I kind of went downhill. I think it's just because it's so light up here. There's, it's 5-point headlight, and then when you have a racket that's, 324 grams swing weight, I'm not used to that. So maybe that's why. Maybe for most people it's gonna work well, but for me, I had a hard time controlling the ball and having that pinpoint accuracy and precision. I didn't feel confident with this racket in that department, so we're gonna score it 4 out of 10. Like I said earlier, if you're trying to be flat and precise, I like this racket more. So maybe for people that have flatter strokes, WTA, women might like this racket more than men actually. That's just something to note there, or just if you have a flatter spin, or if you have a flatter swing in general. Maneuverability, it feels pretty good in the hand. The paint job is nice. Grip changes with this racket were pretty easy. The grip size is pretty standard. Didn't give me any issues here. Swinging through the air, it's pretty light, so it's hard for me to actually grade it poorly. If you don't like the feeling of this neck, throat, heart area, I get it. Maybe then YONEX is just not for you, because I feel like a lot of their rackets are kind of shaped like this. Overall, it cut through the air pretty well. Is it, a 10 out of 10? No, but it's definitely not like a 3 or 4 out of 10, so we're gonna stick it at a 7.5 out of 10, just because since a racket is 100 square inches with a thick beam, that may slow it down occasionally, and that's why it's gonna score the way it does. I didn't have like major issues, it's just not the fastest moving racket through the air either, so 7.5 out of 10. Next is stability. Once again, with weight, I think this racket would perform much better, but then I think you're gonna get too much power out of it. And once again, that's why I put restring sink in here originally, to try and dumb it down. It's 50 pounds in here because it's such a thick beam. So I wanted to, maybe tone down the power. But stability is what we're talking about here, and this is the constant theme that I struggled with on this frame, whether it's on the ground stroke or on the serve, return. Surprisingly, didn't happen much up at the net like we talked about, but just when the ball is hitting in the upper half of the hoop, I don't have much feeling, and it's kind of buckling and feels unstable. So we are gonna give it a 4 out of 10 here. Comfort with this racket was very good. I don't know the exact stiffness rating of this racket off the top of my head, but considering it's a power frame, it's a 100 square inch thick beam with a controlled stiff poly, I had no issues with my elbow, shoulder, wrist, or any other part of my body. So I think this can be a good option for players maybe wanting to look for some comfort as well. You know, you can always string it up with a hybrid or put a really soft poly in here as well. There's definitely options, but even with this setup that I have right now, I didn't have any issues at all. So we are gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. Touch and feel, this is not where this racket is supposed to shine, and it didn't. I know I might be, being a little harsh here, but this is just my review and what I experienced. I was able to hit some nice drop shots, touch and feel angles from time to time, but this is not, they're not going to market an EZone 100 for touch and feel. They're going to market it for maybe power and spin. So, it's going to get a lower score, not horrible, but that's why we're going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's just, comparing to what I'm used to, it's just not giving me those properties out of the racket. And since it has a little bit of an issue with stability, when I really try and take pace off a ball, whether it's a low slice or low drop shot or drop volley, you don't get that feeling out of the racket, especially with the, the dampening tech in this racket. I'm not necessarily a fan with that, so that's why it's going to score the way it did. Now to the spins category, topspin, maybe it would perform even better with a different string. This is Sync, once again, at 50 pounds. Overall, you can get topspin out of it, but then I feel like you lose a little bit of control with it. Once again, if you added weight, you might feel a little bit better. I think I might have felt a little bit better, but then there might be too much power. So it's kind of like if you sacrifice something, something will go up in playability, but then if you do something to another category of the racket, then something else will fall. And that's kind of how I feel like this. So that's also why I didn't want to add any weight. So to my point, topspin is good if you can control it, but for me, I couldn't. So we are gonna give it a 6.5 out of 10. And then last but not least, the slice. Ran into that similar problem with hitting the ball in the upper half. Ball didn't knife through the air, the racket didn't knife through the air as much as maybe say like a pro staff or an extreme pro, radical. And that's expected, but this racket, like I said, is gonna shine in different categories, or it's trying to shine in different categories versus those other types of rackets. So you can get some good slicing out of this, but it's just not the best. It might float a little bit more maybe than some other frames. We're gonna stick it at a 6.5 out of 10. So guys, this is the EZone 100. This is me kind of speaking the brutal truth about this racket. However, I think it's gonna work for a lot of players still. A lot of club players might really love this one, male or female. And overall, I think it can be good if you can dial it in with your own spec and your own weight. If you can control this power and you can really find the sensation in the bed, maybe use a different string. If you crack the code with this racket, I think it could be actually lethal. But for me, I just had a tough time there. So with that, this is the EZone 100. If you want to pick it up, use our code at TennisOn. Thanks so much for watching. It was a fun play test, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.